Good morning, everybody. How are we today?
Good.
So we've got Tommy in for individual training, and I also have Mr. Malcolm Morace here, who is a third-party observer because he has his Cert 4 in training and assessing. Okay, so today we're going to be going through identifying the hazards, assessing the risks, and implementing controls with brake systems. So, Tommy, if you can just fill out the student attendance record sheet for me, please. Thank you. Thank you, Tommy. So first off, we'll get started. So today we're going to be talking about hazards, with identifying hazards in the light vehicle braking systems. We're going to talk about work health and safety. So whilst we're in a training room, if you feel you need to get up, if you're cramping or whatever, if you need to move around just to get a bit of blood flow, feel free to do so. Okay? So the objective of this learning lesson is to be aware of the risks associated with brake systems on vehicles, because there is quite a few, brake dust being number one. So we'll move on to the next slide and we'll have a look. Hazards associated with brake systems. We got asbestos exposure. So a lot of older brake components, brake pad material was made containing asbestos fibres. These fibres, once they're airborne, they can be very, very hazardous to your respiratory system. It can cause breathing problems, lung issues, and mesothelioma. It's a big word, 6 syllables. I'm surprised I can pronounce it. However, in jargon, in normal, ordinary wording, that would cause respiratory issues, breathing. It could end up on oxygen bottles. We have mechanical injuries. We have pinch points, rotating parts. We have sharp edges. Brake system backing plates are quite sharp. That can cause cuts. Crushing injuries if we don't have the vehicle supported on safety stands properly or on the hoist, on the locks. It can fall off, it can slip off, we can be crushed. Strains from having to lift heavy items. So we've got to make sure we're using proper manual handling techniques. Power tools, if we're using electrical power tools for anything, so make sure that they're tagged and dated, and make sure that you do your own visual inspection on the cords. Just because it has a date tag and it's in date doesn't mean it's got an issue. We also have chemical exposure. Brake fluid. Brake fluid can cause skin irritations. It's also hygroscopic. And hygroscopic means it can rapidly absorb moisture. Once the brake fluid has a moisture content in it, it lowers the boiling point temperature of the brake fluid, which will cause your brakes to actually overheat and not function correctly. Brake fluid is also corrosive and can damage paint. If brake fluid is left on car paint long enough, it'll actually melt the paint off the car. So if that can melt paint off a car, imagine what it can do to your skin or your eyes or any part of your body. So the most important PPE we need to be wearing when we're dealing with brake fluid is gloves and safety glasses. We also use cleaning solvents when we're working with brakes. Brake clean, which is quite a volatile substance. It can cause asphyxiation if you breathe that in, so always make sure you're wearing a mask, a respirator. Make sure you're wearing gloves, and do not spray it in anyone else's direction, and work in a well-ventilated area. If you don't have a well-ventilated area, make sure you have fans going, extractor fans, something like that. Workshop hazards. We have slippery surfaces from fluid spills, so we've got spills, trips, falls. If we have brake fluid leaking onto the floor, that can cause an issue. We can fall over, we can slip on it. So we want to make sure that we're containing our brake fluid loss into a drain tray. If we have to disconnect any brake lines or do any brake bleeding, we want to make sure we've got a drain tray that we can catch that in, so that we can not cause a trip hazard or slip hazard on the floor. If we need to disconnect any lines, they make brake hose clamps that we can clamp those hoses off, which will eliminate any kind of brake fluid loss onto the floor. We don't leave tools lying around on the floor. Make sure everything's in order, easily accessible. If you have a toolbox on a roll cab, bring the roll cab to where you're working. Don't go walking backward and forward to get tools. Excessive noise and vibration is another hazard. If you're using an impact gun, they are quite noisy. If you're using an air impact gun, we've got compressors going, we've got loud noise. Make sure you're wearing hearing protection, earmuffs. Rattle guns, impact guns also cause hammering on your bones in your hand. That constant jarring effect can cause muscular skeletal injuries later on in life. Any questions?
No.
No? But if you have one, feel free to ask. We'll move on to the next slide. Assessing potential risks. So, visual inspection protocols. Check for visible signs of damage. Leaks, component wear. So if we've got any seat brake fluid leaking, or we've got physical damage where it's been an accident or something's going to break, make sure we have a look, good look, and we write it down, note it all down. Measuring brake pad thickness and checking it against specifications. In the picture up there, we can see that he's using a digital vernier caliper to measure that brake rotor. So we always make sure we check the thickness of the rotor, how thick it is, and we compare it to our manufacturer's specification in the book. If it is below the limit, then we need to replace the brake rotors. We can test the brake fluid for contamination. Obviously, it gets contaminated every time you take your cap off your master cylinder. It starts absorbing the moisture. So they have boiling point testers that we can use to do that. We can actually use a multimeter as well to check the brake fluid moisture content. But we are going to do that in our next unit when we do tools. So we won't dwell too much on the tools required, because that is our next unit. Obviously examine the rotors for warping, scoring. If it's got multiple lines on it, then it would need machining. Before we machine the rotors, we need to measure the thickness to make sure it's going to be machinable. Because if we machine it and it's undersized, we're just wasting our time, because it's throwing the bin job. Obviously, inspecting lines for deterioration, all the brake lines, make sure that some of them have rubber hoses. They've got to be flexible for steering. The brakes have to be flexible. So we've got to check those rubber hoses for deterioration. As they get older, they start to fray, they can get bubbles in them. And all that hydraulic pressure, instead of going to your brakes, it goes into the bubble and you get a soft pedal. Okay. Moving along to the next slide. Control measures. Engineering controls. So that first picture there is showing us dust containment. So the ideal way to contain brake dust is using a proper HEPA vacuum system. Vacuum all that brake dust out and it goes into a separate container for disposal as per the Environmental Regulation Act. It can get rid of all the harmful brake dust particles. However, that's quite an expensive way to do things. So in a normal workshop that we would be working in, the most effective way is wet cleaning. So wet cleaning is basically water-based cleaning methods. We would wash all that brake dust off with water into a container for proper disposal through a liquid hydrocarbon bin. Prevents airborne contamination. So under no circumstances do we blow brakes, clean brakes out with an air compressor and a blower nozzle. That will blow all the airborne particles of asbestos into the atmosphere. We can't see it because they're microparticles, but we'll breathe it all in and it will attach to our lungs and it will cause us issues later on in life, if not immediately. The smell of burning brake asbestos is quite horrible. And it's the same as a clutch in your car. When you burn your clutch out, you can smell it. It's quite bad. Ventilation. So we're talking about engineering controls here. Ventilation in the workshop. Use extractor fans if you have them. Open the doors. Use proper ways to keep that area dust free. So proper workshop ventilation. Extraction systems will eliminate harmful vapours as well if we're using brake clean as well as brake dust. Safe work practices and PPE. So you've got to select the appropriate PPE for the job. So nitrile gloves for chemical protection, safety glasses or goggles, properly fitted dust mask or respirator when working with dust, potential dust exposure. Safe cleaning techniques. Never use compressed air. Oh, look at that, number one. Never use compressed air to clean brake assemblies or components. This can disperse harmful particles. Use vacuum systems or the wet cleaning method. And always follow the manufacturer's guidelines for service procedures and torque specifications. So torque specifications is relating to the tightness of our brake system, bolts and hardware. Because braking system is one of the biggest safety items fitted to a vehicle, because if we don't have those brake calipers tight and set to the right specs and they come loose, we can cause injury to ourselves, it can cause a fatality, we could harm others on the road. If our brakes aren't working or something falls off our brakes or the wheel falls off, then we can cause a catastrophe or a fatality, which can cause issues, legal issues, all sorts of issues, and we do not want to be the cause of someone's death. So always make sure we follow the manufacturer's vehicle-specific procedures and their tightening torques. Inspection and service procedures. So thoroughly examine all the brake components. Compare them against the manufacturer's specifications. Visible damage, wear patterns, and potential failure points or future failure points. Use calibrated tools to measure the pad thickness, the rotor, and check the run out against manufacturer's specifications in the workshop manual. Fluid assessment. Test the brake fluid for contamination, moisture content, proper level. Replace if condition is compromised. Or you could just replace it. Brake fluid doesn't cost much. You probably need 2 bottles for one vehicle, probably cost you $15 and probably half an hour's worth of labour. That would be a good peace of mind for me to know that my brake fluid is now 100% right and doesn't have any boiling point issues. Component integrity. So we're going to make sure that nothing is loose, falling off, deteriorated, cracked, or anything like that. We want to make sure that it's all good. Functional testing. So we're going to make sure that we're going to road test the car, make sure our brakes are functioning correctly, make sure our handbrake's functioning correctly. Because the handbrake is also part of our braking system. If we had to carry out an emergency stop, we could use the handbrake if we had brake failure. Handbrakes are also important for securing the vehicle if you're on an incline or decline. You don't want your car rolling down the road, smashing into other people's property, which does happen. So we're going to make sure we check that handbrake adjustment and make sure it's fully functional as well. Very important. Compliance with workplace policies and procedures. So we have workplace specific safety protocols and inspection checklists. We all have our own, most workplaces have their own set out procedures, proper hazard reporting and identification documents, maintaining proper comprehensive service records. So that's one thing we can look at when we servicing a car. We can look at service history to see when the last time the brakes were replaced or the brake fluid. We can also make sure that we're reporting hazards as we go. We can report it on a job card. We can tell our supervisor, and we can make sure that that's all good. Technician training. So training is important to make sure that we're doing the job properly. Certification and regular refresher courses. They bring out new stuff all the time. We now have anti-lock braking systems. So they bring out new safety products all the time when they're introducing new cars. Everything's being new, so regular training, keep up to date and keep current with what's going on. Document competency in brake system servicing. So just make sure that you're getting proper training. Backyard people can probably change a set of brake pads, but are they aware of brake dust? Are they aware of the torque specification for the caliper bolts? That we don't know. So we've got to make sure that we're doing the job properly and that we're properly trained in doing that job. So moving along, summary and key takeaways. So risk assessment. Before we commence any sort of work, we would be carrying out a take 5, risk assessment, identifying the hazards and implementing what controls we can have to make sure that we keep safe. Obviously, number 1 hazard, brake dust. How are we going to control that? We're going to use wet clean method. We're going to use extraction fans. We're going to work in a well ventilated area. We're going to trap that wet cleaning into a drain tray, and we're going to dispose of it in the liquid hydrocarbon bin. We've also got rotating parts. How do we control that? We would isolate the vehicle, and by isolate the vehicle we're talking about removing the power source. So no one can jump in that vehicle and try and start the car whilst you're working on it, or try and drive it. We've also got hot parts. Brakes cause heat. That's how they work. They work on friction. So when you're braking, every time you brake, we're causing friction between a moving surface and something trying to slow that down. That's going to produce heat. So when we're working on brakes on cars, if the car has just been driven 500 kilometres, then you can probably assume that those brakes are going to be quite warm. So we let it cool down a bit. We don't touch anything. We can wear gloves if we've got it, if we have to. Work on it while it's hot. We just need to be aware that it is hot, and we've got to take the necessary controls to control that. Other issues we have with safety, crushing. We've got to elevate the vehicle off the ground before we can take the wheels off, before we can take the brakes off. So we've got to make sure we're using a workshop trolley jack or a hoist. And we're going to make sure that we've got proper safety stands. Don't rely on the jack to hold the car up, because it could fail. When hydraulic systems fail, they don't give you a warning, they just collapse on top of you. So make sure we've got safety stands. Make sure we're lifting the car up on a hoist with the proper lifting points, and make sure we're lowering the hoist onto the safety catches. Hierarchical of controls. Implement your engineering controls first. Obviously, jacking it up, safety stands, risk assessment, administration controls, carry out a risk assessment, work out the hazard, what the control is, and the final layer of protection is PPE. Safety glasses, gloves, proper work clothes and boots. Document all your procedures, follow and document all inspection steps, keep a record of it. If you keep a record of everything you see and you report it and it's in writing, then no one can come back to you and say, hey, my brakes failed, but we told you they were on their way out. So that just about wraps up our PowerPoint demonstration of safety in the workplace. So I have this feedback form for you to fill out for me. Thank you, Tommy. Do you have any questions regarding brakes? Do you have any questions regarding brakes, Melvin?
No, I have not.
Have you? I'm glad I can teach you something.
So yes, since this is not my trade, really it was interesting.
Excellent.
Yeah. It was good, Ronnie. Keep going. Very informative from the way I gathered.
Thank you, Melvin. So what is the number one hazard with brakes, Tommy?
Brake dust.
Dust. Thank you. Brake dust is number one. It can kill you. So, and obviously doing the job correctly and tightening everything back up to manufacturer's specs, because again, if it's not done correctly, it can kill you or someone else. And we don't want that on our conscience. That's why brakes is probably one of the most important criteria when you're doing a Cert 3, because there's not only one unit covering brakes, there's actually 2 units of competency for brakes in Cert 3 apprenticeship. So that's how important brakes are. Major safety part of the car. The number one safety with a car is the brakes.
That's correct.
Anyway, I hope learned something from that. And our next unit that we're going to be doing is a follow-on from this one. We're going to be talking about the tools required when we're inspecting and servicing brake systems. So thank you for your attendance. Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, Tommy.
I just have a question, Ronnie.
Yeah.
In fact, two questions. In terms of brake fluid, what type of brake fluid do we use? And then second question, heat with brakes. Is that also a hazard? If you can elaborate a little bit on
Yeah. So brake fluid is basically docked. When you buy brake fluid, it comes in different categories, I suppose, and it's either DOT 3 or DOT 4 for current cars on the road. You can get DOT 5, that's synthetic brake fluid, but that's more for racing. Light vehicles are either DOT 3 or DOT 4, so that stands for Department of Transport, by the way, DOT. So you get DOT 3 or DOT 4. And talking about heat, and that's what that DOT 3 and DOT 4 means. When it's DOT 3, it has a boiling point temperature. DOT 4 has a higher one than that. So depending on what type of car you own, you would have to check with your manufacturer's specifications for brake fluid. It could be DOT 3, it could be DOT 4. The DOT 3 and the DOT 4 is the boiling point temperature difference. So when brake fluid deteriorates or absorbs moisture, the boiling point temperature of brake fluid comes down. So that means when we're braking and we've got the coefficient of friction happening and we're causing heat, if that brake fluid is contaminated, where the boiling point has lowered, that means it can't handle that heat anymore. So that's why we recommend replacing brake fluid every 2 years, or when it's required, using a boiling point tester to check the moisture level. So the more moisture, the less boiling point temperature it's got. It lowers it, so you're going to have evaporation of the brake fluid. You're going to have brake fade because the hydraulic fluid can't do its job anymore. It's just overheating and getting too hot. Does that clarify anything for you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah?
And the heat as a hazard.
Well, the heat is a hazard. Heat can also cause warpage of the rotors. We can get heat cracks in the rotors, heat stress. Your brakes just won't work properly. Okay. Anything else need clarifying? You'll be able to change your own brake pads on your car soon.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be good.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so other thing with brake fluid, like I say, talk about if it gets on paint, it will melt the paint off the car. So if you happen to spill brake fluid on your car paint, wash it off immediately with water. They do make fender covers or guard covers to put on cars to keep the car clean and obviously stop any kind of fluid or grease or anything like that getting on the paint. Okay? Right, yeah, I think we should be just about at time, wouldn't we? No?
Yeah.
Tommy, you got anything?
No, it's pretty well explained. Interesting.
Oh, well, thank you. Anyway, Malcolm, do you have anything?
I don't
No.
know.
But recapping on everything, risk assessment, first off, identify the risk, work out what your control's going to be, whether it's PPE, respirator, or safety stands, remove the power source from the car, take the keys out the ignition, remove that power source, remove the battery if you have to. Just make sure that no one can come along and try and operate that vehicle or machinery, whatever you're working on, whilst you're trying to work on it. Because some people will tag it out. If you find any faulty tools, inspect it, tag it out, inform your supervisor, make sure someone's aware of it. Just implementing controls for staying safe. Okay? Alright guys, I think that's about it. So stay tuned for our next one where we talk about tools, and I think they're going to be right up your expertise.
Yep.
We're talking about measuring equipment, dial gauges, verniers, micrometers.
Yeah,
Won't that be fun?
yeah,
You may even be able to teach me something, which will be great.
okay,
Thank you, everybody.
thanks.